Hey everybody, post-production Ron right here. This was recorded as a Super Show Sunday episode originally, but we talked about so many other things other than Super Show specifically. A full third of the show or more was about topics other than Super Show the game that I thought it would be a great idea to release this as a regular Ron Talks Tabletop podcast episode. On with the show. Hello and thank you for joining the Ron Talks Tabletop podcast. This day we have a special guest here. And so, would you like to introduce yourself?
Mr. Ron, thank you for having me. It is Steve Resk, also known as the SRG BOSS, to those of you who follow Super Show the game. It is a pleasure to be here chatting with you on a Super Show Sunday.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this for a while. Of course, you are the reason why I have this podcast in the first place. As you folks know, I've been into Super Show the game for, by the time this releases, it'll be a year. I learned about the game Dice Tower East last year in early July, so quite a bit of a passion of mine. But Steve, I had some questions for you and everything like that. So we're going to talk about Super Show, of course. We're going to talk about other games as well that I know that SRG is producing. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to start with a little bit of a get to know you question on with your hobby background. How did you get into hobby gaming, and what kind of game did you play prior to Super Show?
I'd say the one that really would have to attribute most of this was a wrestling game called WWE Raw Deal, originally put out by Comic Images. It was created by Baron Vanger Toth and Mike Foley. Mike Foley often joked that he has no relations to Mick Foley. And this was a game that was featured in one of my local gaming stores called Video Game Central. And, they would have Nintendo 64 set up there and Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. Once in a while they'd have an arcade game and the back tables and where you play. And Raw Deal was something I really remember playing from the premiere set. The first deck I bought, it was misprinted somehow. I think I bought Triple H and it came with somebody else's finishing move, so I had to get a new one. And Kane was the first character I played. And this was one of the games that we played at Video Game Central. Other games that were pretty notable were MLB Showdown, NFL Showdown, which was an absolute disaster of a game. And those were the earliest games that I played. I played Magic the Gathering, but most of my hobbies was collectible and trading card games more so than anything else.
All right, cool. And obviously, trading card games was a bit of a passion of yours, and wrestling as well, from what you've been saying and what I've learned about you. So at some point, you were playing the hobby games and everything like that. Concept of the Super Show, the game came about. What's the story behind that? Where did that come from?
So I played a lot of different games, but Raw Deal was one of them that was the largest part of, I want to say childhood, but it was as I was a little older, maybe 13 to 19 range, a little older. I played a lot of Raw Deal. I mean, I don't remember the exact timeline of it, but when I say a kid, it was, under 21,
Right.
22 years old range. I found a lot of success in Raw Deal. I never really played it too competitively at first. I've always wanted to. And there was this big tag team tournament, and I did okay in it. And I ended up playing one half of my tag team deck in a major tournament right after, and I won. And it was the first event that I had ever won. And I got really lucky because there was just a funny combination of one of Kane's cards was stop the maneuver played after Irish Whip, right? And nobody really used Irish Whip except the Hulk Hogan. And I went up against the Hulk Hogan deck in the finals, and he went to Irish Whip me, and he got hit with Kane's big boot. And I was able to, go on and win the match as this young kid. And after that, I started playing the game a little bit more, like looking into the strategies and stuff. I started doing really, really well. And I had a couple of deck lists that were really innovative. And Baron used to put out articles. And one time he cited me as having one of the most copied deck lists. Actually, he said the most copied deck list of all time,
Wow.
which was like a huge honor coming from somebody I looked up to. And then I went on to get into a championship position where it was me versus my brother in the finals. And they said that it was the first time in a gaming history that they had experienced, but definitely Raw Deal, where two brothers were in the finals of a world championship qualifier. And my brother, he pretty much let me win, which was really, really nice of my older brother to do. I'm definitely grateful for that. And the experience, going on to the world championship, getting to meet Baron, the creator of the game, a little bit more intimately. I got flown to WrestleMania, and on the
Oh wow.
flight home, my my flight was delayed. I was on the same flight as Baron, the creator of Raw Deal, and it was to me like really, really amazing because here I was sitting, side by side before they boarded the plane, and talking with Baron, and he was reading a book called The Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius, a book by David Eggers, and I wanted to. I guess I don't know if impress is the right word or just be like Baron so much that I ended up taking this book, purchasing it on my own and going and reading it. And I really never read any book on my own ever prior to this. And I really attribute, my love for reading from, that being the first book I read cover to cover to just be able to have a conversation with Baron about it. What does all this have to do with the origins of Super Show? I found a lot of success in Raw Deal. I was allegedly, I believe still to this day, I was the youngest person to qualify for the World Championship. After the game kind of went to a virtual style, I did really well. I had a couple of runner-up appearances for the World Championship. Once being defeated by John Polverino, as you guys may know, another time being defeated by a good friend of mine, Mr. Chad Gropak. And I had a very good reputation as a good mind for trading card games because I had really innovative deck lists. I did a lot of out of the box things. A couple of very old friends of mine wanted to design an MMA game. I thought it was an awesome idea. Set out to make this game where we had like three distinct roles. One of my close friends, he'll say to this day, he really didn't do much. He had a really cool idea, which was the game idea where it would use two decks, a stand-up deck and the grounded deck. And when you took the person down, you switched to the other deck. That was really his contribution to the game. And myself and the other person, I wrote up the rules and the mechanics to this game, and then the third party basically filled in like 95% of the cards. And here or there, I would throw in like, hey, I think this would be a really useful card for this. And then we would do play testing. But like I wrote this game engine up for this MMA style game. And I think it was a really awesome product. And at that time, we were playing this game called Tops Attack. It was produced by Tops, obviously, and it was an NFL themed version. There are several versions. There is FIFA, which, from my understanding, was the big one. There was WWE. There was baseball, and most of these flopped. But Tops Attack was $1 a pack, and it was a really simple game where you had a football player with three attributes on them: red, green, and blue, and they each had a number on it. The way it played is I would play an offensive character face up, then you would reveal one, not reveal one, but you would play one face down, and then I would choose one of the colors, and then you would flip yours over. And if my color was higher than your color, you scored a touchdown. And that was it. That was the whole game. It was god awful. But we were ripping these packs open for like $1 each and building our teams. And I had taken their cards and I had made up my own rules for their game without like really changing anything. So what I did was the cards had a rarity on the bottom. 3 stars was common, 4 stars were uncommon, and 5 stars was rare. And that was also how powerful the cards were. So I made the game have a salary cap where you could only use a certain number of stars on your team. And that's where like building, you couldn't just play the best cards each time. And then instead of just playing one round of this, you played 4 quarters. So you had a team of 16 with the salary cap, and each quarter you sent out 4 players. So your opponent didn't know if you were going to send out your best 4 players or your worst 4 players or in each quarter. It like caught on like wildfire in my local store that people were going like the Targets near us and the targets by us, and everybody was buying these tops attacks to build their decks according to the rules that like I had set up. And again, I didn't really add much except structure to it to make it feel more like a football game. This was as we were designing that MMA game, and for whatever
Interesting.
reason, the two were connected. I kept calling Tops, like asking for a meeting to show them this product because Tops had the rights to print an MMA game. So finally, they took my call and they told us to come in, and I kind of told them exactly what went on. I said, "Hey, look, this is my gaming background. I went with the two people that I was with. We have this MMA game, and I did really well in this other wrestling game. But besides that, I sold out 3 or 4 stores of Tops Attack, and I was hosting tournaments based on this, and they were like blown away because Tops Attacks flopped. And I remember at the time they like introduced me to other people higher up, and I was chatting with them, and again they made me reiterate the same story, and they asked me my opinion on like why they think Stops Attack failed. um, and I gave them my honest opinion. I said, number one, you have this game, it has little to do with the sport that it's replicating, and people don't like that, and it's just way too simple. You just flip a card over and you win and it's done. And then they said they were going to do a more advanced version in the next release. And I said, I think that that's a horrible idea because the people that like Topps Attack for what it was are not going to understand the more advanced version. It's like having players that play checkers, and then be like, okay, set two is chess. You're going to lose all the people that you retain. So at this point, you might as well do something entirely different. So they checked out the product for the MMA, and they had said that they didn't believe that the players who collected trading card games were the same people that watch MMA religiously. They didn't think there was enough of a crossover to pursue an MMA trading card game. And as somebody who is not a fan of MMA, at almost at all. I don't enjoy MMA. When I was a kid, I trained boxing and I trained MMA. I've been in the ring. I've had bouts. I take no enjoyment in watching two human beings beat the hell out of each other for real. I agreed with them. And that was a little tough for the guys I was working with. And they had asked for a wrestling game. And I had spoken to the guys I was with, and we were already like having some falling outs about some other things, and the relationship was getting pretty muddy. One of the designers of that old game refused. They said, we will not design a wrestling game. We came in here with MMA, we're leaving with MMA. And I was like, I think that's kind of ridiculous. You have this huge company that's offering you to do a wrestling game. I would at least hear them out. So there was a refusal and there was a separation there. And I said, I wasn't going behind anybody's back. I said, I'm going to design a wrestling game on my own. We could continue to ask them about MMA. We can continue to do both. And they weren't interested in the MMA. So I had a follow up where I pitched Supershow, which was a board game. And it's very close to the board game prototype that you see now on supershowthegame.com. And I brought it in and I explained to them, the mechanics of the game. And again, the background that I had with the gaming. And I remember they made me redo my pitch to somebody else, to the brand manager, which I was really flattered by. And at the end of the demonstration, they said, we love the product. We really like you, but why are you not designing something from the traditional trading card game model? And at the time, I didn't really understand what they meant, but I get it now. They wanted something with packs and randomization where people could buy over and over again rather than just one box set, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I actually didn't want to do a trading card game because there was Raw Deal, right? Raw Deal was the wrestling game. It was the game I knew and loved. I looked up to Baron. I wasn't looking to, replace it or put it on the shelf. But I also felt that number one, Baron, may he rest in peace. Raw Deal was done. It ran its course. It probably wasn't coming back. That was pretty public knowledge. And I had a great opportunity to improve on some of the problems that I felt Raw Deal had. And to me, some of the problems that Raw Deal had were it didn't really feel like a wrestling game after a while. And on the board game, I had this really cool system where you moved around the board and you had a skill chart, just like you do in Super Show when you go around the board. You're going to do a finish roll and you're going to roll your dice, and then you're going to have the 3 breakout rolls. And I said, all right, let's switch that over to a card game. So I started designing a card game. It had the same mechanics, the turn rolls. At first there were 5 card types rather than 3. And I started testing this idea. And it was working really, really well. And I have to say, from the very beginning, people enjoyed it, but I kept simplifying it. I just kept wanting it to be more simple. So I got it down to just leads and follow-ups and finishes. I designed this pitch for Tops where I had this huge card pool of all these cards I wanted to make. But I thought to myself, what deck would I play that would be the best for any character that I designed out of all the cards I was setting up? And that was the start of what the El Super Hombre versus Snake Pit deck was, where it was like, okay, these are the cards I want to make for wave 1. If I only could build one deck, what do I feel would be like the best overall from the cards that I was working on? And then I started with those. And the whole concept was, if you look at the Super Hombre versus Snake Pit deck, you kind of never waste an action, right? Even if you throw a drop kick for no reason, you could play a headbutt to draw a card later.
Right.
Everything kind of pays off. But the original idea was to use WWE branding and have the same deck, but different pictures on all of them. And what I mean by that was, if you had John Cena versus Randy Orton as your Super Show box set, you would have, both players would probably have punch, but Cena would probably have the Protoplex as a follow up grapple, where Orton would have the DDT on the ropes or the spinning power slam, right? And I had the idea to make them have the same effects, but different names and pictures based on which character you're using. And this would be fairly easy to do if you had access to WWE's photo library. So while I was designing these, so I wouldn't like misplace them or mix them up, I put the name of the character and the card number on each of them. So I could switch them in and out pretty easily. And that is how the card numbers for cards were founded. It was a very happy accident. And then I would just change only a couple cards, where maybe Randy Orton would have a number 25 that did something different from John Cena. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. If you just swap them in by card number, this is how you can
Yeah.
build your decks.
Um, so I had a question about the deck size. When did you settle on the 30 card deck? Was it
Originally, it was 60, which was a standard
I
deck.
figured, yeah.
60, you had multiple card types. You had lead, follow-ups, setups, and finishes. And then you had a commentary card, which is like a card that you could like put up to 2 of them face down and then reveal them to do like commentary, to like search for cards and things like that. And it was, again, it was, that version of the game was awesome, but I was really going for something more simple and easy and accessible, right? Something that had customization. That was always the goal, but also was very easy to design a deck for. So it was very hard to teach somebody how to play Raw Deal or Magic, right? Who's not familiar in that surface, especially, hey, you got to build a deck and you could pack
Yep.
up to 3 cards or 4 cards. And some people play 15 lands and some play 21. It depends what you're doing. So I wanted it to be simpler, and I was doing what I would describe as like cutting away the fat, anything that was just a layer of complexity that was not needed. And hey, what better than having a deck that was half the size in one ofs? That's even more affordable for people to play. So I eventually like stuck with the 30 card deck, and it felt right. Very Super Show is very streamlined with 10 strikes, 10 grapples, 10 submissions, right? And then
Yep.
you have the
Yeah.
15 leads, 12 follow-ups, 3 finishers. It all seems very, very balanced. So that's how the game started taking shape. And I started pitching that to Tops. And I had several meetings. And again, I was a very young kid. I was in school for, believe it or not, biomedical informatics and taking science, a lot of math while I was working on this. And I kept having these meetings and everything would go good. And Tops is a really amazing company, especially at the time. They had the rights for WWE, UFC, Marvel, Star Wars. And I had such big ambitions for this. I was like, hey, this game engine is so great. you could release your WWE version, and then you could release your Marvel version, and then you could release your Star Wars version, and you could even do a UFC version if you felt that that was the way to go. And you could have the same mechanic across the board. Maybe you call the skills, I had different skill names for all the cards, but the color coding of the skills was the same. And I suggested, like, you could even say stop any blue card instead of grapple or strike. And then you could have this amazing game engine where you could have Darth Vader versus John Cena or versus Wolverine, and people would go crazy for this. And they said, oh, you can't mix IPs. I said, well, maybe you don't advertise that you mix the IP, but you just release independent products and let people do whatever they want in their house. So I'm working at school. I'm having people tell me you need to trademark, you need to copyright, and do all these things. I'm spending money I don't have. I keep getting promised I'll get a contract. I keep coming in and giving them information and data and just lots of emails, lots of phone calls, and nothing is really coming out of it. And Gen Con was approaching. I was testing the game with WWE branding. We had a tournament once, which is where I got reintroduced with John Poverino. He ended up winning a tournament in the WWE version that we were playtesting. And as Gen Con, I brought it out to Gen Con to test. And then the following Gen Con, I had made the decision that if I didn't hear from Tops, I was going to move forward on my own. So on the back end, I worked with Nuno, who's one of our most highly requested artists. I met Nuno online, and he commissioned the 27 card arts that you know today and the 4 original characters, Rising Sun, Big Shot, El Super Hombre, and Snake Pit. A lot of people know the history, get a good laugh out of Big Shot's ethnicity changing throughout the designs. But again, Nuno had free design. I didn't give him like almost no details. I sent him the characters, the reference art, and he designed everything kind of from the ground up. And I took this version and I brought it to Gen Con. I was running demos with it, and the story is pretty famous. I printed the cards locally at a shop that wasn't even known for this type of thing. And I didn't have any boxes or dice. So I had made custom boxes out of Chinese food containers, which was my uncle who I was living with. His idea at the time. He said, if you don't have boxes, why don't you get a Chinese food container? Those must be pretty cheap. It was a really great idea. And I kind of just ran with it. I was like, that sounds really cool. And we started incorporating it into our story. We didn't have die. Originally we were using D6. And the D6, like next to the skill power, would have the number 1 and then 2, and then it would convert over. And that was a little confusing. So then we needed symbols. So we actually had to make the dice self, put stickers on counting cubes for like kindergartners. So we basically made our own dice out of stickers and blank cubes. We printed the rule book in like a booklet form at a print shop, and we like rolled it up to stick it in the Chinese food container along with these cards and these sticker dice. And that was the original Supershow. And I brought it to Gen Con. I don't even remember how many copies. I want to say 200 copies or so. And I probably went through like 150 plus, 160 of them in the debut. People were like, this is awesome. You have to put this on Kickstarter. And I didn't even know what a Kickstarter was at the time. So I looked into it, and I ended up setting up a Kickstarter for about $8,000 was our goal. And at the time, one of the major playtesters of this game was Dosmo, Maurice Thompson, aka Master Dosmodius. And Dosmo and I used to go a couple times a week all around New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, and just try to demo the game. And besides working with Maurice, I had worked with John Schnur, aka Loudmouth Leo Larynx, and somebody I knew from Raw Deal. And I said, hey, I'm demoing this game with Maurice. You want to come down and help me demo? And in tandem, we sold 18 copies of this game out of Chinese food containers. The store owner was blown away, and he ended up taking extra copies too for his store. And we really felt we had a good thing going on, and we were promoting the Kickstarter. We were asking for $8,000, and it really was coming down to the wire on funding. And I have a uncle who is very, very successful, and he ended up donating $1,000 at the end of the campaign with like the last 2 days to put us over. We had funded and we had produced the game, overseas for the first time. And I'm forever grateful. I mean, he tells me to stop thanking him every time I talk to him and every holiday, and that I would not be here if he did not sign that $1,000 to put us over the edge. I think we raised like 8,700. We probably could go back and look. We had a really nice looking product at the time. And that was really the beginning of everything.
Well,
But after that, we just, there were so many hurdles with going overseas, and just my own moral compass told me I wanted to print here in the United States. So we
right.
actually reverted back to the US after that, which was rough for a while. And, in hindsight, fast forward, way forward, it worked out, really well in our favor, because once we hit the COVID era, there were so many companies who couldn't get any of their products from overseas. We already had like a well-established machine of producing here in the US, and that it like enabled us to do Origins and Gen Con following COVID, where a lot of other companies weren't even able to do that. It ended up, really working out. That's the baseline. So, obviously there's 10 years of stuff in between, but it started off as pitching it as an MMA game and working on this other rules to a game and making a crappy game popular and using that to talk to Tops, and then Tops Xing for a wrestling game. And it went from board game to a trading card game. And then I simplified it to being a box set, but always wanted it to have stipulations and title belts and customization, but really in theme with wrestling. And then just little by little, things grew. And I had John Calais, who was a longtime friend of mine, a very smart person. And once I showed him the idea, I said, John, I've laid out the money for the art. I laid out, this for copywriting. Here's where I'm at. This is what I need from you. And we'll go 50-50 partners for life. I don't regret any of that decision. And John agreed. And, the rest is really history between us.
And so we're approaching the 10-year anniversary. I'll have to say that Snake Pit, El Super Hombre, those characters are still very viable today. I think they're some of the best in the game. It's still a great set to start off with. So it's just a testament to your design sensibilities. Very accessible game. So when did you know that this game was going to be a long-term success? Because you had to have had a feeling at some point.
I want to say that I've always believed in it. When my oldest daughter Isabella was born, that's when I really took the leap to dive into this. I don't think I would have done that if it wasn't me believing in the product that I had been designing. Part of the reason was I was in school, I was doing very, very well. I have a very funny schooling background. Um, where I had a scholarship and I got lost it and I got accepted to a school, and then the school told me it was a mistake. And I basically told them that if I'm not enrolled in this college after losing my scholarship, if I go home and tell my parents that I received this acceptance letter on error, I might be homeless. The dean of the school had told me that she would get me in a program if I promised to have a 4.0. And she said, judging by my SAT scores, that should be very easy for me to do. Paraphrasing. I never really took school seriously, even though I was considered, pretty intelligent by a lot of people. And I took it very, very seriously. And I kept the 4.0 for a very long time before I ended up leaving to pursue this, actually. And at the time of my daughter being born, I felt that I owed it to my future child to take a chance on what I believed in. And I didn't want to look back to them and say, when I was younger, I really wanted to do this, but I stayed the course. And, the Kickstarter was funding. I was spending so much time on design and trying to learn Photoshop, not even Photoshop, Excel, and then getting into Photoshop, that it started taking away from my schooling. I don't know if I was sure that it would be a success, but I was certain that I was ready to take the chance at that point. The moment where I knew it could be something big officially, I'd say there were probably two very key points. And one of them is interesting because we're coming on being event partners at Gen Con again. We had a lot of momentum going into a Gen Con, and they bumped us. They told us they had no more booth space for us. And I said, you guys can't do this to us. We sold 100 tickets to the gaming events. One of our world championships had 100 plus players of this unknown game. And now you're telling me I can't even be a vendor the next year? And they say, yeah, we sold out. The only way to be involved is to be an event partner. So I guess we'll see you next year. And I told Calais, we can't not be at Gen Con. I said, well, hold up on the phone. How much is an event partnership? And they gave us a very large number. And I said, we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I told Calais, do you think we could get a loan to do this? And he said he'll make some phone calls. And he got a personal loan from a friend to go to Gen Con. And we assembled a team of my friends. And we went to Gen Con. We brought back Chinese food containers and fortune cookies with our ads in them. And we put down a wrestling ring canvas. And we were able to make the money back to pay the loan back in full after that, the very next day. So we had by far the most profitable Gen Con experience that we've ever had to date, which is why we want to do this again now that we have like an official looking product and a good team behind us and a good following. And at that point, that was really something, because to make that type of money in a week was more money than I've had kind of ever experienced. I'd say at the time I went to the first Gen Con after I had asked John to come on board as a partner. I might have had $500 to my name, which was being spent on art and artist credits. So at that point, that was a really big one. And I'd say the next bigger one for me was while I was working an auto part sales job, doing very well. I could have a very comfortable life with that position. And I was trying to negotiate with the owners on how many days off a year I could take. Therefore, I could not be penalized for booking conventions. And I wasn't even asking for paid time. I just wanted to know if I was given 10 days off a year and my days off for Saturday and Sunday. Okay, I'm going to Gen Con this year. I'm taking off Thursday and Friday. That's 2 days, and then I'm going to the next convention. And they weren't hearing any of this. And they basically gave me an ultimatum to stop asking questions or to take it or to leave the company. And I said, well, if that's my two options, then I guess I'm leaving. And I went home to my now wife and I said, I'm pretty sure I just got fired. And it didn't feel bad. It felt good. It felt like a burden off, and at that point, I started doing more convention shows and more promoting. And, you get to the sink or swim point. We were swimming, which was a really, really great feeling after a while. And again, we're not at a point where it's this super lucrative business I'm in, but it's been enough for me to live and get by and, live month to month now going on several years and have a really enjoyable lifestyle. So that's definitely where once I was able to walk away from my job and stay afloat, that was the point where I feel like I knew I was onto something really great.
Those sound like some keystone moments. You've been going for 10 years with a great team and a passionate community, which is like the best thing about this game and this company. It's a community that it's built. But I know that you've had challenges along the way. Like I know you mentioned with the printing, particularly overseas, and then when you first started over here printing in the US. But is there anything that sticks out to you that you are particularly proud of overcoming?
There's challenges every single day. I mean, on a personal level, my grandfather, great guy overall. He used to tell me that I was so stupid for putting stickers on dice. And if I was smart, I would have paid somebody else to do it, despite not having the funds to pay somebody to do it. Which my argument was if I had the money to pay somebody to put stickers on it, I would have just ordered custom dice anyway. I was just using whatever means I had. So to be able to become your own man and step away from family businesses and earn the respect of people and be able to turn away is definitely was a nice obstacle to overcome. And just on like my parenting side, my mother means super well. I love her. She does so much for me and my children. But every time I was doing this, it was like, don't you think you should go stay in school and stay on this path? And so's doing this and so's doing this. And I was just like, Ma, I just need your support. That's it. I just need you to support me in what I'm doing, and everything would work out. And just, people saying you got to go into distribution, you got to do it through someone else and get paid. And I said, no, I want to do this on my own. My grandmother, the Grand Machine, and the Duke, who was now passed away, were kind enough to let me use a basement that was destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. I mean, without Hurricane Sandy, who knows if I'd even be here, because it was just a shell of a basement in there where I put card catalogs and racks to build products and hand assembled everything with the help of my grandmother and my friends, and just overcoming this hurdle of you can't do this without a factory behind you. And, we became our own factory. Really, we never let anything stop us. From the beginning, we didn't have box. We used Chinese food containers. We didn't have dice. We made them out of stickers. We didn't have a manufacturer. We bagged things on our own, printed it, and stapled it. We ended up doing everything on our own. And basically, every time someone told us that we were too small to succeed or couldn't do it on our own, we just kept on doing it. Maybe one day people will look at what was accomplished on our end, and that will be the mold or the blueprint compared to what everybody else has accomplished. Every single day we face hurdles, and that's a part of business, and that's a part of things that people don't see. But nonetheless, like, you get up and you fight the next day. That's really all there is to it. I can't think of anything overwhelming that I was like, well, thankfully we made through it. I guess COVID would be a great example. You mentioned the community. There's so much to talk about when it comes to SRG Universe and Supershow. And for me, I always wanted it to be fun. I always believed in play it forward. I played Raw Deal, and if you weren't one of the few people on my team that I built decks with, you felt like my arch nemesis and my enemy. And the fun that you had was based off of your win-loss records. And I only remember a couple of events where things were really goofy and people had a good time. And I never wanted that for Supershow. Not taking anything away from Raw Deal or Magic the Gathering, but you look around the room and people are super serious. And then you look at a Supershow event, and even on the highest stakes of matches, people are goofing off and they're having fun for the most part. Obviously it doesn't always go perfectly, but it's really a great environment. I consider myself so fortunate to have what I have and have people that believe in our cause, that I always try to treat the fan base and the people in my community with respect and with caring. To see the community come together and overcome the impossible odds of COVID and adapt to online events with 70 plus people, and people deck teching and talking and getting messages every single day that this game is the reason I have my sanity. This game is the reason why I still have my happiness. This is the only thing that is getting me through this. And at some of the darkest times of the world, is some of the funnest things that I remember, is having Supershow events and Talk of the Universe coming to light, and Why Wrestling, and the online events and the title belts taking shape and all this stuff. It really was the ultimate hurdle to overcome. So at first I felt like I couldn't think of one, but overcoming COVID based on the community coming together is definitely something I'm very proud of.
Yeah, you should be. There's a lot of companies that were your size that ceased to exist. And obviously you're still around and thriving. So that's something to really be proud of. But I know that SRG does not only produce Super Show, that there are other games that are in production or that you're working on. So what are some of the other games that you have that you're working on or have worked on in various capacities?
When Super Show was started, I actually was developing Scallywager at the same time, and I had the same sort of card art print out on piece of paper, purple and yellow sleeves forever in a little treasure chest, and we used to play with cups. And that game is really special to me because, again, developed it around the same time as Super Show. And one of the biggest playtesters of Super Show and Scallywager was Maurice Thompson, Dosmo. And Dosmo was such a special friend to me, and especially Loudmouth Leo. And I'm not ashamed to say that this weekend at Origins, I shared a room with Loudmouth Leo. We were reminiscing about Dosmo, and both of us very emotional night and a lot of laughs, and just that guy not being here, but seeing this product here has been really, really special, especially that it was designed around that same time. And Scallywager is something that I've always known would be a huge hit. And seeing it now and being doing as well as it is really, just nothing short of a dream come true. Same for Super Show. Scallywager is based off the ancient game of Liar's Dice. And I gave it a board game style element where you have adventure cards and treasure cards with it. My love for the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise is clear throughout this game. When I was in high school, I got very sick with mono, and I was out of school for 3 months, maybe more. Couldn't really go out of the house. I was extremely, extremely sick. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched The Curse of the Black Pearl during that time. I had posters, pictures, everything. The moral of the story is I've read the children's books, the novel, the teen books. I've watched all the movies. They usually come out on my birthday around May 26th. I said I'd skip my prom when Pirates of the Caribbean 2 came out if it meant missing the opening. That really got me into loving pirate lore. So not only was I reading Pirates of the Caribbean books, I started reading pirate history books and so on and so forth. And I had this Liar's Dice game that was based off Pirates of the Caribbean with the barnacle cups and everything. And I loved that game, and I refined it. I made the betting a little bit more simple. I started making cards up based off Pirates of the Caribbean. I always said like it would be a dream come true to put like Jack Sparrow branding on this game. Again, just like Super Show, it was just such a hit, like being played with people. And I think because I know to keep things simple but thematic, people really gravitate towards the games that I create. And now Scallywager is here. It is this game of Liar's Dice where you have adventures and treasure cards. Treasure cards are items that are drawn and added to your ship. They are kept face up. Everybody in the game knows what they are, and you could use them in between the round of bluffing and deception. They could be things like a pistol, which you and another opponent, if you only have one crewmate or one dice left, you could shoot your opponent and win the game. It could be a cursed medallion, just like in the movie Curse of the Black Pearl, where if you have that on your ship, one of your crewmates can't die. They can't do anything else. They're cursed for life, but they are undead. The only way that you could lose the game at that point is if somebody steals that treasure from you or makes you lose it. And then there's also adventure cards, which adventure cards are hidden when you draw them, but you only have one round to use it. And in that round, you could use them to manipulate dice rolls, curse other players, and do all these fun things. Did the artwork for this game and the graphics in 2017. And here we are in 2024. It is the first time that it is for sale in mass. No Kickstarter, no publishing company. This has been done all on its own through SRG Universe. And that game is available right now. Aside from that, we have another game available called Rummy Gummies, which came together so quickly. It is amazing. Did a lot of play testing with it. My oldest daughter, Isabella, her idea, I had added the worm mechanic. She had come up with the gummy bear idea where she wanted to play Rummy with a game with pictures on it, which it wasn't cards and numbers. And Rummy Gummy, we like to call the sweetest family card game, where you're trying to play those classic games of Rummy where you want to make a set of 4 and 3 cards, but you're not matching cards like numerical values and kings and queens. You're matching flavors of gummy bears. So you need 4 grapes and 3 cherries. You have wild bears. You have split flavored bears, which are 2 colors. What makes the game really fun is you have gummy worms, which were my idea, where if 3 in a row are thrown out, you have to do the effect of those cards. And they have almost like Uno style effects where they could be disruptive, skip, reverse, switch hands with a new player, switch cards with a new player, or draw a new hand for yourself. And the whole idea behind this was in Rummy, there isn't much strategy. Basically, the strategy is pick up and throw out and try to pay attention to what other people pick up. But when you have these worms that can't be used to win the game, and they have to be thrown out eventually to win, you now have to make decisions on when you throw certain cards out. You can't just throw out the cards you don't want. Because it might make you switch hands with the next player. So it's this really fun, adorable, colorful game, but it has this tiny element of strategy that makes it like actually a little bit of a brain teaser at times, but on a really, really basic level. And it is still random enough with the card effects where even all the best strategy in the world is not going to make you win majority of the time. In that game, we've been printing locally, and every time we brought 50, 60 copies to a convention, we've left with zero. So that's really exciting to have something alongside my daughter that's been doing really well. Other games that I have developed and finished, and I don't even know if they'll ever see the light of day. We have the Supershow board game, right? That's ready to get a print run without art. But I designed a game called Ultra Crepidarian, which has got hundreds of files on a computer. It's an amazing little party game where an ultra crepidarian is a word that I fell in love with when I heard it. It is a person who speaks about things that are beyond their scope of knowledge. To me, what is that? Pretty much every person on social media. Everybody's an expert on everything.
That
So
sounds awesome.
it's such a good game.
Yes.
It is you get a random cards, right? You get subjects and scenarios and it makes up a random topic. And then two players or more, depending on how many your player, are chosen to comment on that made up subject. And the other players have to like which comments they like best and choose a winner. So for example, we used to play this on Twitch streams. It could be like what fruit needs to be banned from airlines, right? And we've had some great debates. Like, I clearly think it's the coconut, Ron. It's the hardest of all the fruits. It can be used as a weapon. And, somebody else might say, like, I'm wrong. It's the pineapple. It could be swung. It's acidic and all this. And, we go back and forth. We argue. And eventually we pick a winner of a fake topic. So that was the game Ultra Crepidarian, which was a ton of fun. And then we have other games that are in the pipeline that are a ways from being finished and published, like A Night in a Halloween Town, Scare B&B. And they all have the same principles. When I build a game, I want it to be simple. I want it to be thematic. I want you to be able to teach somebody how to play after one game. And I want you to have a good time while you're playing it. That's really where we're at with all these games.
Cool, cool. All those sound great, but I know that you have some other things coming down the line for Super Show, the game, and SRG Universe. So tell me about it. What's coming?
The big one coming right on up is Super Lucha. We've done about 7 or 8 Kickstarters now at this point. I've lost count. A few of them for the game, a few of them for comic books. Again, you want to talk dreams come true. We have 6 issues published for the Super Show stories. I'm writing alongside Pat Mulligan and now Christopher Gordino. But now we're kickstarting Super Lucha. And I got to give a huge shout out to Elgato Shinobi, aka Zach Bruno, a great friend of mine, for reaching out to the creator of Mucha Lucha, who was looking for voiceover actors and such. And, he said, hey, do you want to put you into? I was like, yes, reach out to him, give him my contact number, immediately, see if there's something to do. I would love to do this Mucha Lucha crossover. And he was very, very receptive. And I wouldn't know Eddie Mort offhand as a household name, but Mucha Lucha, the cartoon, is definitely something I enjoyed and recognized. This idea for Super Lucha, which was based off Super Show the game, and now adding this pop culture icon and the art style to it together and doing a game that was a crossover between the creator of one of the most influential wrestling cartoons of my childhood, or just influential wrestling cartoons ever, with this game that has become a mainstay in wrestling gaming culture for the past decade, just seemed like such an awesome fit. And to see how receptive he was to use some of the characters he's created for other IPs and mix them with ours and blend them together and just get on the phone with him, and just from the minute we started talking, everything clicking. I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm very enthusiastic, and Eddie is just the exact same way. He is so devoted to his craft. He loves wrestling, and not even just mainstream wrestling. I'm talking real classic lucha libre history, and it was just so amazing to work with somebody who has accomplished so much. I mean, what better dream than to design your own story and animate it on your own and sell it to one of the largest enterprises for TV, Warner Brothers, and really just do super well for yourself. And just from the moment we, pitched the idea, we want to have Snake Pit and Super Hombre and Gia de los Muertos in there, and Ariel Lipstick, and just throwing some of our characters that we think would be a good fit alongside his, and everything just really coming together so well was really. It's just, again, for me, it was a dream come true on a dream that I didn't even wouldn't even think. Right. I don't know if that makes sense, to be able to take an iconic cartoon, and I can't really think of a better fit for what Super Show events, you know, what Super Show represents for me than something like Mucha Lucha.
Yeah,
And
the
working with
chocolate. Yeah,
like New Japan
chocolate and
Pro
peanut butter.
Wrestling. Yeah. Like New Japan Pro Wrestling was amazing, and signing deals with guys like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks was amazing, and that really hits that like niche wrestling fan. But like, I'm not only a wrestling fan, as you see with my love with like Pirates of the Caribbean. I love cartoons. I love comic style stuff. I love like Marvel superheroes, and to be able to go back and watch Mucha Lucha, and then like my homework for a project be watching Mucha Lucha and watching the special movie that they released that you could get on Amazon, and then going back and watching all the works that Eddie put together in El Campeón de Lucha Libres during COVID, and the spin-off episodes he did, and that like feeling of this is my homework for a project. The whole process was just so exciting. And the fact that Eddie is so welcoming and so humble and so talented, and again so generous. I mean, this is one of the most recognizable artists for his field in the world, and for, again, he's getting paid accordingly. This is something that is obviously more expensive than what we usually do work with Eddie, but he's just so kind and generous throughout the whole process. Like, just to give you the example, he designed the box art in the front and this beautiful playmat and all the characters, and he did a full animated video that I actually uploaded to the pre-launch page of Kickstarter today. And he looked at the box and he said, "You know what? It's missing something." And then a couple days later, there was a back of the box illustrated for me, and he said, "Don't worry, no charge to your company. Thank you for so much for considering me for this project." And like, just that extra that he just did, just meant so much that he believes in us and the project and everything. We work together and we're designing a Super Show box set. It's going to be a 4-player box set, just like our 10th anniversary set that's coming up at Gen Con. Going to have one of our originals, 3 of his. It's going to have a very similar design to the Super Hombre vs. Snake Pit deck, where you have your basic stops to get you introduced to the game. You have all cards that are very, very playable. Some people have said the 7, 8, and 9s are like the best cards that we've ever released, and no wasted motion. You play cards, it's going to give you a reward later. The characters are going to be based off some of the most powerful characters we've ever released. The artwork looks incredible. There's a lot of wrestling moves in there. There's a lot of fun Super Lucha style things like the rolling tire, fire of obliteration, the Lucha Libre lighthouse, there, and then you're going to see your drop kicks and your fall away slams and your kicks and your suplexes and all those things as well. So it's really been so much fun to work on a whimsical version of Super Show that people have just told me this is my favorite art style that I've seen. Being at Origins and other gaming conventions, when I mention Mucha Lucha's creator is partnered on us to do Super Lucha, and seeing a general pop and a general positive reaction has been really, really rewarding. So if you're not aware of this project, go to superluchathegame.com. Free sign up. That's free to get notified. For $1, you will get the Kickstarter exclusive Gia de los Muertos competitor for that set when you back the Kickstarter. So now, if it is even available, which I believe it will be as an add-on, you're looking at a $20 add-on, 15 to 20, depending on where it is. I believe that if you can buy it, it'll be $20. If you can, that might not even be available. It depends how many VIPs we have. You'll get that investment for just $1. there are going to be 15 creator characters announced where you could have the creator of Mucha Lucha draw your character. And then the art team that he approved will be working on it with finishers. And then there'll be 30 slots for a creator card art, in addition to a couple basic tiers. Tier one is going to be our best value. You're looking at $29 for a 4-player game. And then you're going to look at a second tier, which is going to have a play mat and an extra character. El Super Hombre will be debuting on your second tier. So you're going to have one of the better values we've ever released. And if you're familiar with our Kickstarter projects, we've already hit a promo card in the Thunderbolt and Lightning, very, very frightening card. We have Eddie lined up to release all the characters he created via stretch goals. And if you're familiar with any of our projects, I try to make our stretch goals very, very accessible. I think we're going to smash our goal of $10,000 in minutes, if that. We did a Kickstarter where gave me the nickname the 2 Minute Man for a very long time, and the 2 minute challenge for funding in under 2 minutes. I think we're going to smash that. Once we start smashing that, we're going to start unlocking more characters by Eddie and more amazing things. I think it is going to be one of the best values we ever had. And hopefully it's going to be the most successful campaign that we've ever had. And I think it's going to draw in way more players that are into the cartoon and pop culture side of gaming and not just the wrestling. And when those two worlds collide and you see what it's like to go to a Supershow event because you've been brought in by Super Lucha and you've seen our characters and people dressed up and cutting promos and hearing the stories of how people take care of each other and the laughs, I think that it's going to be really huge for us, and it's going to be pretty revolutionary for anything we've ever done.
That's awesome. And I'm looking forward to that myself. It's gonna be amazing. That art looks amazing. I'm sure the game's gonna be amazing because it's already based on an amazing game.
I mean, just seeing the
Yeah.
animation, Ron, like Eddie made us, I mean, for the first time. If you ever watched any of our Kickstarters, it's no secret that we are a grassroots team. We're learning on our own. We've never delivered this home run of a Kickstarter video, right? We've tried a bunch of different things. My favorite one to this date is where we filmed in studio and we had my grandma as a part of it, where she came in dressed as a referee at the end while we were talking. John and I were dressed as the game, and it was a really hilarious time. She had one line in studio, and when she came in, instead of saying "I want a good clean fight," she said "I'm here," and we just died laughing because she didn't know what to say. Then she did it again. But anyway, we've always had these like very low budget, very authentic to who we are videos. I mean, some of our Kickstarter videos were the Grump Danny Thunder using a template on his iPhone and uploading images to it. But now we have an actual video animated by the creator of Mucha Lucha, and it looks like an episode of Mucha Lucha. I mean, it's incredible. I was so blown away by how amazing it looks, and seeing Snake Pit in there and Super Hombre in there. And if you don't know about me, I also love to work with music and have an incredible artist, A-Swag, who does a lot of our beats and our Afro. He does Afro beat style music, which I happen to love. He created our own Super Lucha theme and jingle, and like that's in it. And then you have Christopher Wardino, who's a good friend of mine and a great comedian. He does the voiceover to it. And again, this is over Eddie Mort's animation. It is by far the best video we ever put. And it's not even close. It's in the stratosphere from everything we ever done. So couldn't be more excited to have that debut.
Cool, cool. Well, I got one last question for you that I like to ask all of my guests that come on to my podcast. So, Steve, what is one interesting thing about you that people may not know about?
I don't know. I think I would like to use this opportunity to share something that people may find interesting or may be surprised, because I often present myself as very like extroverted and out. But I myself find myself struggling with mental health more often than people may think. And I think mental health in general is something that people need to be more open about speaking with. And here at Super Show, we really believe in play it forward. And part of that reason is that, and I've been drawn to gaming for being that escape from, the hardships that you might experience in your day-to-day life. The distraction, if your brain might be overthinking some stuff, I always find it really calming to look through my cards and sort and play. So I think people might find it really interesting that I myself have bouts of anxiety and sometimes bouts of depressions and, insecurity and such. I really appreciate the love and the bonding that I get from the Super Show community. And I try to give as much as I get out because it really does mean more to me personally than most people would understand. We've had mental health groups here, and I know a lot of people who have said some pretty incredible things about how they were treated by the community or my company directly and how impactful it's been for them. But for me, I don't ever want to see anyone in any area, especially in the gaming community, struggle. And I've seen, people have been sad and I've personally reached out to them or they gotten a phone call or a letter from me or a conversation from me. And sometimes people feel or think that I'm not in that realm with them. I'm very fortunate. I have a great company. I have a wife who is so far out of my league. I don't even know how it's my wife. I have beautiful kids, but that doesn't mean I don't have my own internal battles and internal struggles. And some people kind of are taken back that I could even experience that or feel that way at times. So it may be interesting for some folks to learn that I've experienced some really tough times and some of my own internal battles. And I'm really okay with being upfront with that. It might help somebody to hear that and make it a little bit easier for them to reach out to somebody or to communicate with somebody. Maybe interesting or not, but one of the ways I like to do that is through music. I don't necessarily think I'm the best in what I do in the music field, performing on a private and friendly level, but producing it. I do love to produce music. I love to link up with artists, not only for gaming artists, but musical artists as well. And I feel like it's a really great creative outlet and especially a great expression of your mental health and your mental well-being. So if you didn't know that about me, I have my mental hangups that I'm not ashamed of. And I also like to make music on the side.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Great that you're willing to be vulnerable like that about a topic that we should be a bit more transparent about. I really appreciate it. With that being said, thank you once again, Steve, for coming on to my podcast and chatting with me for a bit here.
Ron, it's my pleasure. And you said it's your 1 year anniversary. And for me, it's incredible. I almost can't think of Super Show without Rumble Ron. And you've done so much for us in such a short period of time. You made such a great name for yourself in so many ways. The promos that you've put together, the way you've embraced your character, the content that you put out, before, after, and during Super Show. And again, it's just been an absolute pleasure to have you around.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, folks, for listening to the Ron Talks Tabletop podcast. And until next time, see you later.
Bye, man.